So starting the test drive in this Cruze, I feel like the 1.4 turbo was a bit more, it felt a bit less underpowered in this car than it did in the Buick Encore, the Chevy Trax. So I liked how it was tuned for this one in particular. But there's a traction there as it started to rain. Of course, these tires don't have the best tread on them, but still with your traction control, not specifically dangerous. But also with a turbocharged engine, you kind of get that turbo lag, and then when the turbo kicks in, you want to be ready for that. But we're gonna give it some throttle here. So power is definitely not bad, especially for a car that gets you 30 miles per gallon city, 40 highway. I think that's what it was rated for. And the ride is definitely not terrible. Of course, the rain is picking up here and the wind, I kind of want to keep my hands on the steering wheel just so I don't lose control or anything like that. But overall, again, pretty easy to manage, even with these less than ideal tires. And it's driving very well. I remember driving these when they first came out. I guess it was 16 or 17, and drives pretty similar. Don't feel like there's a huge loss of power due to the turbo usage. But again, this one is a low mile Cruze for a 17 compared to some other ones that I've seen. But again, driving pretty nicely. Now for the price point, I think the Cruze is a pretty, even when it came out, I think it was a great option for commuters, because you had a vehicle that definitely wasn't the smallest on the inside, especially compared to the outgoing generation of the Cruze, but it just, in 2016, it had all the technology in terms of Bluetooth, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto that you could find readily available. And again, you had a turbocharged powertrain that was pretty peppy when you needed it to be, but extremely fuel efficient when you didn't need that power. And usually pretty inexpensive to maintain. I think the biggest issue, and pretty much with any turbocharged car these days, is going to be if something does happen to the turbos, where you have to replace them, because they're certainly not cheap. But you get a vehicle with a lifetime powertrain warranty, something like that, and you're usually in pretty good shape, because those tend to cover a lot of those turbo issues, specifically if you have to replace a whole turbo. But again, pretty good car for the money in my opinion, just because it's so cheap to run, so cheap to maintain, and again, you have pretty much all the technology that you can want in a vehicle at this price point. And with it being a smaller car, I like that it was very roomy on the inside. You had trunk space, but it drove like a small car. So easy to park, pretty easy to drive, keeping the lines. And again, in terms of safety technology, I think you can option in getting blind spot monitors and things of that nature, but you really didn't need it. These days, a backup camera is pretty good if you're somewhat attentive while driving. But lastly, it's easy to drive. It's somewhat comfortable. Again, this is all relative to the price point. It's nice to have that power seat. It's nice to have cruise control. The ride is pretty solid, not necessarily silky smooth, but not harsh at all. So again, just cheap transportation and good on gas. But this will bring me to the end of my review of this 2017 Chevrolet Cruze in the LT trim level.